Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? It's Dr. Hyena, and we are back with yet another live stream. So let me just share this on YouTube for a little bit. Oh, okay. Looks like that's going on. Alrighty. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so the current wildebeest model in the game is not bad by any means at all. It's actually one of my favorite models that I've made, but it is a bit problematic in that it's very high poly, and that means, in turn, it costs quite a bit for the game to really run. So what I wanted to do is just come in here and, really quickly make a new wildebeest model, not necessarily from scratch, but using the Mosaic Survival and Into the Jungle Hartebeest as a base. And Into the Jungle is actually going to have wildebeest as well, and the Hartebeest too. So yeah, we're just gonna use this guy as a base for our new wildebeest, because they're in the same subfamily. They're Alsalaphians is, I think, how you say it. And yeah, they're actually a lot more similar than one might expect. So it shouldn't be too hard to, kind of change this up a bit. So first thing I want to do is edit the kind of posture. So like, the neck is very different. That's kind of the main thing really with wildebeest versus hartebeest. That and the horns, and then obviously the beard and the mane and whatnot. But aside from that, they're actually like surprisingly similar. So we can go into sculpting. Personally, I don't like to sculpt too much. I usually prefer to edit stuff like in edit mode, but since this is already rigged, I don't want to have to like re-weight paint it and like do all that jazz, and we won't really have to, so no reason to really bother with that, frankly. But we can always clean it up in edit mode if we have to. Uh, Probably won't be the case this time around, though. I guess also the skull shape is very different. Though I will say, this seems to be a male wildebeest. The females actually do have a slightly different looking skull. They don't have as much of this kind of bulging, pronounced nose bridge here. That's very much something you see in the males and not the females. So may or may not incorporate some sexual dimorphism here. I think that would be nice. And then again, just going back in with the shoulders and the neck. And a bit of the torso there. Of course, it's low poly. It's not going to be, one-to-one by any means. But that doesn't mean I don't want to, at least try with it. Oh, okay, this is gonna look cursed for a second because it's gonna be a wildebeest with hartebeest colors. Yeah. Oh God, that is quite something. Oh dear. Or bovine, or bovid rather, not bovine. And of course, the other obvious thing is that the tail is a lot longer in wildebeest, or at least the hair, like the tufts of it. Not necessarily the bones themselves. Actually, you know what? I was afraid we would have to remake the tail. That actually looks really good though. Okay, very pleasantly surprised there. That's always nice. Cool, cool. And then you're just getting all of that accurate. God, yeah, that's the buffest hartebeest I've ever seen. Oh dear. Oh boy. Oh boy. So hopefully, you know, the goal with this more low poly version of the wildebeest is that we can hopefully have like bigger herds in game. Because right now the herds are a little small. There's only like 50 wildebeest on the entire game, which sounds like a lot, and it is, but you know, in real life that number could and should be like into the thousands, right? Now I don't expect to have thousands in game. That's obviously very unrealistic and a little too heavy on performance costs, but you know, it is definitely something that I want to consider. It's just having those larger numbers in general. Now, what exactly those would be, I don't know. I'm thinking within like the low hundreds would be really nice, but we'll see what the game can actually support. And yeah, the horn shape is like very, very different. Also notice wildebeest don't really have this kind of part that like leads into the horn, at least not as much as in hartebeest, so I'm gonna try and dial that back a little. Like smooth it out a little more. And also it doesn't like point back as much. I mean in black wildebeest, sure, but in blue wildebeest, definitely not. Like it just does a little bit of that backwards curve. It's only really at the tips. However, this section is a little further back in real life, so might as well replicate that there. Oh, not the ears. The ears we can mostly just leave, they're not too different. You know what? I'm gonna send this to one of my friends real quick. I don't know if he's watching the stream or not, but I think he would find this really funny. Oh man. No, that's a good one. That that looks cursed. Uh Heart of Wildebeest. Yes, that's correct. Yes. All right, we might have someone joining us in a couple of minutes, or in a few minutes. But yeah, okay. I mean, at this point, we're actually pretty close to done. That, if you really think about it, we just have to. Well, I want to fix the jaw morphology a little. But yes, it's the ultimate antelope, is what it is. It's got the strength of a wildebeest, the speed of a hartebeest. You know, it's perfection. The ideal antelope body. How long have I done Blender? Oh, okay. So I I'll be a little careful about how I answer this, just because like I've kind of gone back and forth. So I'll actually explain the full story, right? So I would say I first got the software for Blender in 2016 or 2017, one of those years. I didn't take it seriously back then, and it was a lot of on and off between then and 20. Ooh, I want to say 2018 into like early 2019. Um, but eventually, you know, I got a little bit more serious in later 2019. I did a little bit of Zoo Tycoon 2 modding. That was kind of the thing back then. If you were like into animal gaming, that was a bit of a thing, especially in like the zoo scene. So I dabbed my hand in that a little. Wasn't particularly fantastic at the time, but I was okay at it. And then in 2020, when I heard about Roblox supporting mesh deformation, that's when I really got more serious about it. Um, and at the time, that's when like Wild Sahel was planned, um, and yeah, all kinds of fun stuff was happening then, including a pandemic. But no, yeah, I think I definitely made the most of the pandemic. I definitely, started taking Blender a little more seriously. Though I would say I also started taking it seriously even in January, so before like the whole lockdown in March or whatever, right? Um, so yeah, that's that. I hope that answers your question. So I've been doing it for quite a few years. Also, don't worry if the rings on the horn look goofy. Obviously, wildebeest don't have that. So, I mean, they have like some grooves there, but like not really like this. Also, the thickness I gotta say is like very buffalo-like. I gotta trim that down a little. But yeah, I'm really surprised by how good the tail looks though, guys. Like, I totally thought I would have to redo it from scratch, but no, it looks almost perfect as is. Like I mostly just have to redo the coloration and add the mane and the beard. That's really it. And then I probably will re-rig it, to be honest, and give it new animations. I don't dislike the current Hardebeest animations for like Into the Jungle and Mosaic Survival. I think they're actually pretty decent, but um, yeah, I'm not sure. We'll just have to see about that. We'll see, because it really could go either way. All right, so you guys see these flat planes, right? They're not actually gonna stay like that. They're going to become the hair, if you know what I mean. So it's like it's like when you have a PNG image, which is what's recommended, um, and it's transparent in the background, but you can make certain parts opaque or not transparent, and then essentially use that. So I'm not sure exactly how I'm gonna lay it out, to be honest. I didn't really think that part through because I wasn't sure how I'd set up the tail textures, but I don't think it'll be too crazy hard. Like I can kind of see it working there. just needs to be like more vertical than what I have here, which I can do by like tweaking the angles a little bit, or more than a little bit. So I think that would be done. Yeah, very simple, just like that. Maybe expand this part for like a little more detail. Doesn't need a whole lot. Yeah, we can do a little better, I think. And we can do the same thing for the beard. That one's even simpler actually because it's only 3 faces. Now some people would make this like a separate model, like a separate mesh piece. I personally don't see the need for it, you know? I think it's similar enough to where like that's not really needed. And I also do want it to deform with, you know, the neck and the chest and, you know, just the whole body to deform together. That's usually the sort of goal I have, and that goal becomes a little hard to achieve when you have to like match up the weights for, you know, all of them, right? So I'm gonna save myself a little bit of time there. Not sure where that one is though. Oh, I see. Okay. That's a sneaky little one. Alright, alright. Unwrap. We could even try using those. I mean, it doesn't really matter as long as it looks like hair, frankly. We could do them separately, but it might not look as cohesive if that's the case. Worth a shot, though. We'll see. We are just experimenting here, really. It does allow for more detail, I'll admit, but again, might just... Well, I guess it's not too hard to align them. Just gotta line up like where the transparent areas would meet the black areas. It seems pretty accurate. Well, I might just have to save that part for later. Or I could just do this. Yeah, you know what? I think I like that better. I think I'm gonna apply that method to the main. Because the main just looks a little too fuzzy right now, I would say. Just down to personal taste. I mean, all of this is down to personal taste, honestly, but you know. I think those ones can all be, you know, one piece because they're all, you know, very close to each other. I think they do require a little more cohesion. And I think that looks a lot better, actually. Nice fuzzy looking wildebeest. Or not fuzzy, actually. You know, it looks very coarse, as it should. Alright, hello everybody who joined the chat. Let's see what we've got here. We've got Diamondback, we've got Primal Rage. Oh yeah, Primal Rage, you're the one that asked the blender question, of course. 40 BW sightings. I don't know if I pronounced that right, I'm sorry. Levi, we've got Jenna, got Nakumbe. I'm not sure if I pronounced that one right. Got Animal Gaming Studio. Welcome everybody. Oh, and Nixian. Almost forgot you, my bad. Alright, so we've got that part done, the sort of modeling part. Do want to edit the horns a little though. Feel a little... It's weird. It's weird. From some angles they look a little too skinny and from some they're a little too thick. But I'm sure by the end of this, you know, we'll reach something that looks at least decent. That's the goal. think they, depending on if it's a male or female, they can curve inward a certain amount. And then I know some adults have like straight horns that just kind of poke up like that, but I'm going after, like I'm going for a full grown adult here. So that won't be the case. Alright, and now, actually, you know what, we should probably make a copy of this just in case. Or we can do that later. It shouldn't be too much of a risk. Alright. But now what I want to do is actually go in with this plugin that I have. It's called UCU Paint. I can just do a quick setup. Yep. Alrighty. Okay. So what it's gonna do is it is going to take what we have here, and we can, you know, make a new image, whatever. We can basically like change the colors. We can just like straight up draw over it for areas we don't like so much. There's a lot of creative freedom here. Seems like we can't pick colors from the underlying layer, which, you know, to be fair, we probably won't need to. They're not colored very similarly at all, so I don't think that would be too much of a concern here. So let's actually start with the horns, which, forget where I actually put them on the texture map. I know they have their own seam. That's what this red line is. I know one of you was asking that. But yeah, it's basically where I would want to put like different parts of the texture. So like, okay, you know, the horns go over there, right? Very easy. We can just kind of identify that and paint it. You know, the beard has that, the mane has that, right? Or the mane actually doesn't have one, but it doesn't need one. And then the nice thing about this is, as you can see, it's different layers that you can kind of go in with. So, you know, what if we don't want to do normal coloring, right? What if we just want to make something darker? Well, we can do that. We can just set it to multiply. There's other modes that make it darker too, but multiply is kind of your go-to in most cases. And we say, oh, you know, maybe that's a little too much. Well, we can just tone it down, tone down the transparency or opacity. And then just go in like that. And then if we want it to only be the faces we have selected, which probably is the case, you know, we don't want the ears getting affected by this, we can just click on this. And now, if we try to paint there, nothing happens. Right, so the other option for not having as much of an effect is that you can turn down the strength there, which is what you want to do if, you know, you want to have the layer itself not change the opacity too much, but you do want a little, you know, softer kind of stroke. And then we can even soften it some more. and can go into flat viewing here. A little misleading in this case because we actually do need to see the underlying material, but generally it's actually like quite useful if you want to see, you know, the color of an object with no shading. That can be pretty handy. But now I do want to turn this off because, you know, we do have to still do the part where it blends into the horn, right? So going back to our base color here for the horns. Just letting that kind of bleed in. Maybe make like a little more of like a hairy like texture to it. So you can tell like the different materials. And they're both keratin, but you know, a little bit different. Alright, so we can just call this horn base colors. Let's also expand it so we can actually see. Horn shading. And then excuse me, I'm just a little bit tired because I had a lot of classes today. But anyway, we can make this, we'll call it facial markings, right? We can go dark. I like to tint it a little bit bluish, you know, just so it's not totally black. Like, very few things in life actually are completely black. So, and for this I actually want to have the opacity all the way up. I know around here you actually get a little bit lighter around the eyes, just a little. And then maybe even a little lighter in some spots. Can make it smaller too for like more precision. Smear it a little, just blend them in. Heck, we could even make this its own layer, just call it like eyelids, right? That might be handy there. Because it's kind of, you know, a different material, it's skin versus fur. In fact, yeah, let's do that. Let's just call this one real facial markings. There we go. And we do same sort of thing there, just darker colors this time around. I know around the nose actually it is still sort of like a usually a tannish color, but sometimes you get like a more of a gray or yellow tint to like the skin. And we could probably do the stripes in the same layers, this, if I'm being honest. Yeah. Actually, and a little fun fact about that, like, white band, right? There is actually a wildebeest subspecies that does have that. That's called the Nyasaland wildebeest. I think there is another name for them. It might even just be white banded wildebeest, but yeah, they're very interesting. They have that sort of like white band going across the snout. I don't know if it goes into the eyes as much as like a western hartebeest, but still super interesting that like no other wildebeest subspecies have that, but just them and their relative that's more distant, which is the hartebeest, and specifically the western hartebeest and also the Hirola. Yeah, guys, this is what an African wildlife obsession does to you. All right. Just always been like a huge passion of mine. So we can just invert that selection just to keep the horns, out. Actually, we don't even have to do that. We can just, or well, I would still rather do that. But I was gonna say we could just move the horn layer up, which we did. And then just toggle eraser and just go back and get rid of anything we don't want. There might be stripes here later, but for the time being. But I love the little mask that wildebeests have. Very, very iconic, I gotta say. And we can always just go back and check the reference, make sure it's all accurate. Yeah, I happen to be someone who knows a lot about wildebeest, as you can probably tell, so probably won't need to do that too much, but it's nice to just double check everything. And to be fair, this really does vary depending on the individual wildebeest. Like each one has like a slightly different face mask. Like animals aren't made in a factory. They're not like robots where they're all just going to be identical. There's always, some level of individual variation there. Oh, and I've just realized, oh, that's a rough one. I've just painted that on the wrong layer. Wasn't too much though. That's not really a problem. But it can become a big problem if you're not careful about it. Could lose a lot of progress that way. I know I've done that. Not my brightest moments, I gotta say. But it happens to the best of us. And actually another thing that like varies between wildebeests is that at least with eastern white-bearded wildebeests, that like some of them have this sort of like brown diamond-like marking on the forehead, others don't. But I'm pretty sure all the southern wildebeests have just black there. Could be wrong though. Now we can, you know, kind of touch it up, give it more of that like furry look to it. It's short fur, but it's, or excuse me, short fur, but fur no less. And then we can make another layer, right? We can just say face marking details. Then we can get the color from the layer that's underneath, which I'm not sure why the color selection tool isn't working. That's weird. Oh, there we go. And then we can just make a slightly darker version, or significantly darker even. And when it's darker, usually you want to go a little more saturated, I find is pretty nice. And change the hue a little bit, just so it's not exactly the same sort of color. Now this contrast, you know, looks a little stark at first, but obviously we're gonna go in and blend it out. And something I do want to keep in mind here is anatomy, right? So like, you know, I know the bridge of the nose certainly has a very pronounced sort of form to it. I know this part of skull, or excuse me, this part of the skull does. Right? So it's not all just like the fur texture necessarily that you have to get right. But the fur texture is part of it too, just not as big of a part as one might think. And their eyes are pretty much the same as the hartebeest, which is why I haven't touched them. Like, I don't really need to, frankly. It is always important to like kind of take a step back, um, like zoom out, whether physically or, you know, in this case digitally, just to kind of look at your work, see, you know, what's going on. So like, you know, doing that allowed me to see that, you know, this area is lacking in detail a little, right? So kind of go in and adjust that. I do notice a little bit of an issue right there, right? So it's not letting me paint here. What we could do is we could, there's always like multiple ways to solve, you know, problems like that. You know, we could go and just straight up paint where that is. Could try smearing it, see if that works better. This one face is being real stubborn, huh? I mean, it happens sometimes, I guess. Oh, you know what? No, there has to be like another layer with stuff on it that's like not allowing it. Oh, there we go. Alright. Alright. Sneaky, sneaky little bastards they are. Alright, so now all it's really left to do is kind of change the base color and then add the stripes. That's really it. And then we'll be done. But so far, very happy with it. So the color we could probably do at the very bottom. So new image. Just call it for colors. Alright, and then for this one, we actually want to set the mode 2 color. So basically it takes whatever's underneath, like all the values, so like how dark or light something is, that all stays more or less the same. So it doesn't really matter here, but what does change is the hue, the actual, like, the color, where it is on the rainbow, you know? And also like how saturated that is. I think in our case we want to tint it a little more brownish. Not more brown than it already is, but more than what we just had there. We could try to, well, if it lets us select it from the image, that would be nice, but it looks like it won't. But you know, no biggie. We can always just color match. Doesn't have to be precise. I think it's a little more yellow than that. There we go. And this is, yeah, this is just also a nice way to like get different tones across as well. Like just more subtle color variation is important. So I do want to just unselect all the hair and the horns, because I actually do like the colors that those already are, and I don't want to change them. And then, you know, let's say we want some areas to be a little more gray, right? We can lower the saturation, maybe tint it a little more red, for example. It's very subtle, but it does add just a bit more life to it than we would have otherwise. Maybe, you know, if we lower the strength, get creative, go in with some more cool tones, right? So especially with a gray animal, or gray-ish animal, you can actually have a lot of fun with that. So some wildebeests actually don't have that many stripes, but most of them have a decent amount. So this one definitely will have some, like at least on the neck and the chest. If we want to darken some areas, we can again just make a new multiply layer. I think we set the thing after that, but yeah, I know, very descriptive, the thing. Alright, so I think that's actually pretty good for the colors. Although I did just remember that um, their ears actually have this kind of dark color to them as well, so we can easily add that. Specifically the back of the ears, not so much on the inside. Insides are still like kind of more yellowish. Alright. Then let's see, what else? What else can we do here? Thinking the reference image I have, this one's like kind of bending its elbow a certain way, but default model obviously shouldn't have that, you know? And then I think I do want to make a separate layer for the stripes. Um, just in case, I decide to do like different stripe patterns, for example, right? Might not go into that much detail, but we'll see. For this one, maybe we can try a multiply layer. Yeah, I feel like that works. Doesn't have to be as distinct in color as like the facial markings. Yeah, maybe in this case, mix actually looks better now that I think of it. Yeah, not the best render, but let's see. So far, looking pretty good. Just want to... I think that part of the skull seems to be thicker in Wildebeest than Hardebeest, so almost forgot to correct that, but we're getting it now. Alright. We are almost done. I just want to make it a little bit more grayish overall, but... Well... Yeah, just a little bit less saturated than... Alright, I think I'm gonna leave it there. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Hopefully soon enough you'll see herds of these guys running around in Eternal Enemies. They might look a little different, might make some edits here and there, but for the most part, this is more or less what you'll be seeing. And I will see you guys later. So till then, take care, peace out, and goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.